It was supposed to be just another night of dumb fun. Mike's bright idea, a late-night fishing trip on the old Willow Pier. Nothing special, right? Until the whispers started. And then, the thing from the water. No one expected Mike's line to catch something like that. A pale, dead hand emerging from the depths, pulling something much worse behind it. That night, they wouldn't just be fishing for laughs. They'd be fishing for survival. Mike was always the guy with the bright ideas. This time, his latest genius move was dragging his friends to Willow Pier for some midnight fishing. "Best catches come at night," he'd said, flashing that confident grin of his. Jake, as usual, wasn't convinced. "Mike, are you sure this isn't just another one of your sober ideas? Remember the time you tried to barbecue inside the garage?" Jake had always been the cautious one, the guy who thought things through. But of course, here he was, standing on the pier anyway, because Mike had a way of convincing everyone to go along with his wild plans. The rest of the gang wasn't much better. Lisa, always curious about local legends, was already fiddling with her phone, probably Googling something creepy about Willow Pier. Tom, the jock with more muscle than sense, was cracking jokes like he was the world's worst stand-up comedian. And Sarah? She was there to make it clear she didn't buy any of the supernatural nonsense. "Ghosts? Please," she'd scoffed more than once tonight. They set up their gear, and in true Tom fashion, he managed to knock over a cooler full of drinks, sending cans rolling across the pier. "Guess I'm fishing for beers tonight," he yelled, earning a groan from Jake and a laugh from everyone else. As dumb as he was, Tom always knew how to break the tension. But as the night crept on, things started to feel off. Midnight was approaching when Lisa suddenly froze. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, eyes darting toward the water. The rest of them paused, listening. "Whispers," she said, "coming from the lake." Sarah rolled her eyes. "It's just the wind, Lisa. Not everything is a ghost story." Her skepticism sparked a minor argument, but before it could get heated, Mike clapped his hands. "Focus, people. We're here for fish, not ghost hunting," he said, though even he was glancing over his shoulder a bit more now. Hours passed, and things were quiet. Too quiet, until Sarah's fishing line suddenly jerked. "I got something!" she shouted, excitement lighting up her face. Everyone rushed over, only to burst into laughter as she pulled in an old boot. Tom, of course, lost it. "Nice catch, Sarah. Maybe we'll find a whole wardrobe by sunrise." As they settled back into their spots, Jake couldn't resist sharing a story he'd read about. "Did you guys hear about the fisherman who disappeared here? Supposedly he haunts the pier, searching for his family he lost in the lake." Lisa naturally was all in. "I knew this place was haunted. I knew it!" Sarah just snorted. "Sure, Jake. Real spooky. Let me know when the ghost shows up with our pizza delivery." But as the minutes ticked by, things got stranger. The pier's lights flickered, their fishing rods twitched, and shadows moved in ways they shouldn't. Even Tom stopped cracking jokes, his usual grin replaced with unease. Then it happened. Mike's raw jerkhead violently. "Ooh, I've got something big," he yelled, gripping the handle teat. The others scrambled to his side, the tension thick in the air. Tom, of course, couldn't resist. "Maybe you've hooked a sea monster, Mike? Or Sarah's second boot?" But Mike's face had gone pale. He was reeling in fast, muscles straining. The line was heavy, too heavy. And then they saw it. First, it was a pale, slimy hand, tangled in the fishing line, dead, lifeless. Lisa screamed. Sarah backed up, eyes wide with disbelief. Jake just stood frozen, staring at the water. Tom, for once, didn't have a joke. As the body slowly emerged, water dripping off its gray, bloated skin, the group realized they weren't fishing for laughs anymore. They were fishing for their lives. Mike stood frozen, the pale hand still tangled in his fishing line. But it wasn't just a hand anymore. A body, bloated, waterlogged, and horrific, was rising from the water. Its eyes were hollow, staring blankly at us. like it had been watching the lake for decades. I felt a chill crawl down my spine as the corpse emerged, limp and lifeless, but somehow alive. This was no fish Mike had caught. It was the dead fisherman from the legend Jake had just mentioned. "Holy—" Tom started, but words failed him. I grabbed Mike, yanking him back, trying to snap him out of it. "Mike, move!" I shouted. But he was rooted to the spot, eyes locked on the fisherman's empty stare. Lisa was trying to calm everyone down, but her voice was shaking. It's just a trick, right? This has to be some sick joke." But no one was laughing now. The fisherman's corpse wasn't done. With a slow, eerie motion, it started crawling onto the dock, water dripping from its ragged clothes, its dead eyes still staring at us like it had unfinished business. "Run!" Jake screamed. We didn't need to be told twice. We bolted for the car. I could hear Tom stumbling behind me, his heavy feet slapping against the pier. Of course, he tripped, tumbling forward with a loud crash. Despite the terror, I couldn't help but snort. "Tom, seriously?" I called back, half laughing, half panicking. Even in the face of a nightmare, the guy was a walking disaster. But this wasn't funny, not at all. We barely made it to the parking lot before things got even weirder. Just as we turned around, the fisherman vanished. 1 second he was right behind us. The next, gone, like he was never there. We stood there, gasping for air, glancing around like idiots, trying to figure out where he went. "Did you see that?" Sarah's voice cracked. "Did he just disappear?" "Curse it," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Lisa, ever the logical one, shook her head. No way. There has to be an explanation. Maybe I don't know. We're seeing things." But when we reached the car, things only got worse. Mike fumbled with the keys, trying to start the engine, but it wouldn't even turn over. Come on, he muttered, jamming the key in again. The car was dead. "Great," Sarah groaned. "Now we're stranded here, one with that thing." Lisa was pacing. "There's no curse. The car's probably just old or something." But even she didn't sound convinced. I mean, how do you explain a vanishing corpse? Desperate, Lisa called her uncle, Detective Mark Thompson. He'd always been the one to poke around these weird local myths, and we figured if anyone knew what was going on, it was him. "Uncle Mark, we need your help. Something's happening at Willow Pier." To our surprise, he didn't ask questions. He just said, "I'll be there in 20. When he arrived, Uncle Mark didn't waste any time. He started digging into the mystery, piecing together the legend with details we hadn't known. Apparently, the fisherman's family still lived nearby. They had been grieving his loss for years, completely unaware of what had happened to him. Uncle Mark's investigation uncovered something even more bizarre. The fisherman hadn't just disappeared by accident. He'd been obsessed with catching something, a legendary fish known as the shadow fish. Rumor had it this thing granted eternal life, but the pursuit of it had driven him insane. That's why he vanished. Jake, ever the problem solver, had an idea. We need to help his spirit. If we can help him find peace, maybe all of this will stop. It sounded crazy, but at this point, what didn't? Tom, still shaking from the run, nodded enthusiastically. Yeah, sure, whatever. Let's do the peace thing." Not exactly the sharpest tool in the shed, but at least he was on board. We gathered whatever tools we could find, following Jake's instructions to perform some kind of ritual to put the fisherman's spirit to rest. But leave it to Tom to make things worse. Just as we were about to start, Tom knocked over the makeshift altar, scattering everything. "My bad!" he yelped, scrambling to pick it all up. We were doomed, but somehow, even with Tom's clumsiness, we managed to complete the ritual. And then, something amazing happened. The spirit of the fisherman appeared one last time, but this time, he wasn't menacing. His eyes weren't hollow anymore. He looked at us. No, he looked through us. Then, without a word, he slowly faded away, leaving behind only ripples on the water. Suddenly, Mike's car roared to life. We didn't ask questions. We piled into the car and sped away from that pier as fast as we could. The nightmare was over, or so we thought. As we drove in silence, trying to make sense of everything, Mike reached into his pocket, and his face went pale. Guys, what's this?" He pulled out a locket, an old rusted locket that we'd never seen before. Inside was a picture of the fisherman's family. We all stared at it, knowing that somehow we weren't done with this yet. Story 2. I should have listened to old Pete. We all should have. But when you're out there, laughing with your friends, pulling in strange fish, and making dumb jokes about sharks, you don't think it'll happen to you. I can still hear Tommy's laughter, right before the boat shook, and something unseen began pulling us into the darkness. The worst part? We never even saw it coming. It was supposed to be a simple weekend, a fishing trip. I needed a break, and what better way than hanging out with my best friends, cracking jokes and catching a few fish. That was the plan anyway. I'm Jake, and this weekend it was me, Tommy, Rob, and my sister Lisa, heading out on our beat-up old boat. Tommy, the goofball, had been talking about this trip for weeks. He'd even packed a ridiculous amount of snacks, probably more food than bait. Rob, always cautious, had double-checked everything from the life jackets to the weather forecast. And Lisa, well, she's the smart one, making sure the boat wouldn't fall apart while we were out there. We swung by the local marina to fuel up, and that's where we ran into old Pete, a fisherman who looked like he hadn't left the sea in 50 years. He had that look, like he knew things. "Where y'all headed?" he asked, squinting at us from under a sun-bleached hat. "Just out to catch a few fish," I said, grinning. "Nothing crazy." Pete didn't smile back. "Stay clear of Shadow Cove. There's things out there. Things that don't belong." Of course, Tommy found it hilarious. "What, sea monsters? Ghosts? Sharks with laser beams?" But Rob frowned. "Maybe we should listen to the guy." I shrugged it off. "We'll be fine." We set sail early Saturday morning, the sun just starting to creep up over the horizon. It felt like the perfect day. Calm waters, clear skies, and the boat engine humming smoothly. Lisa was in charge of the boat, like always, while the rest of us sat around and got our rods ready. Then, of course, Tommy had to pull his usual antics. Instead of normal bait, he'd brought a loaf of bread and a bag of random junk, old coins, buttons, even a rubber duck. "The fish around here haven't seen this before," he shouted, chucking a piece of bread into the water. It didn't take long before the rest of us were cracking up. Somehow, though, Tommy's bizarre bait actually worked. He got a couple of bites, and for a while, it felt like just another goofy adventure. That's when Rob got a hit. And not just any hit, it was strong. The kind that makes your whole body jerk when the fish pulls on the line. "Guys, I think I've got something big!" he shouted, gripping his rod tight. We gathered around him, watching as he reeled in whatever monster was on the other end. But as the thing came into view, the laughter stopped. It wasn't like any fish I'd ever seen. It was huge, slimy, and had this unnatural, eerie sheen to its skin. Rob's face went pale. "What is that?" Before we could figure it out, the boat lurched, hard, like something enormous had just rammed into us from below. Tommy fell backward, screaming, "Shark attack!" But no one was laughing anymore. The boat shook again, and this time the motor sputtered. Lisa scrambled to check it, but nothing made sense. It wasn't the engine, it was something else. Something we couldn't see was dragging us, pulling us further out into the open water. Slowly at first, but steady, like an invisible hand yanking us toward the depths. "Cut the line! Cut it!" I shouted, realizing Rob's fish might be the source of our problems. But no matter how hard we tried, the fishing line wouldn't break. It was like it was made of steel, too strong to snap. Fear started creeping in. Then Tommy, ever the comedian, pointed to the water. "Guys, relax! It's probably just a big old whale or—" He stopped mid-sentence as something massive glided beneath the boat, casting a dark shadow in the already deepening water. Rob dropped his rod, panic setting in. "We need to get out of here, now." Lisa, always the sharp one, was the first to notice something even worse. Guys, look at this." An old, slimy rope had surfaced, trailing alongside the boat. It wasn't just a fishing line. It was thicker, ancient-looking, and covered in muck. The rope was winding itself around the boat, pulling tighter and tighter. Attached to the end was a rusted, seaweed-covered anchor, like something from an old shipwreck. "What the hell is that?" I muttered, my heart pounding. Before any of us could answer, the boat shuddered again, harder this time, like whatever was down there had gotten angry. Just when I thought we'd escaped whatever was pulling us under, something far worse emerged from the water. It wasn't just the boat shaking. It was something alive. Massive. A tentacle wrapped around the side of the boat, tightening its grip. We thought we were done for, until a shadow appeared on the bow. That's when we realized we were never alone. The boat was shaking harder now. Panic set in, and it spread fast. Tommy, the Joker, wasn't cracking any more jokes. His face was pale, his hands trembling as he pointed at the rope. "We're gonna die, man! We're all gonna die!" "Shut up, Tommy!" Rob barked, trying to stay calm but failing. His hands were shaking too. "We need to work together. If we panic, we're done." Tommy's attempt at lightening the mood came out weak. Maybe it's just a really strong fish, right? Nobody laughed. I scrambled for my phone, my mind racing. Mia. My friend Mia was a marine biologist. If anyone knew what the hell was going on, it would be her. My fingers fumbled as I tried to dial her number, but of course, no signal. Not out here in the middle of Shadow Cove. I cursed under my breath, stuffing the phone back in my pocket. "We're on our own," I said. "No help's coming." Lisa and Rob exchanged a glance, both of them trying to think of what to do next. Meanwhile, Tommy sat on the edge of the boat, staring at the water like it was going to swallow him whole. "Guys, we're not making it out of here, are we?" he muttered. And then everything stopped. The shaking, the noise, even the strange pull under the boat. It all just stopped. The water was still, dead still, like the calm before a storm. "What the hell?" Rob whispered, his eyes wide. The rope that had been pulling us began to retract, slowly, slipping back into the water. Whatever was down there wasn't done with us. Suddenly, we noticed something strange. Lights, faint and glowing, coming from below. They flickered in the depths, eerie and unnatural, like they were watching us. Tommy's face twisted with fear. "What is that? What are we looking at?" Rob leaned over the edge of the boat. "I don't know, but I don't think it's just fish." "Lisa, we've got to get the motor running now," I said, my voice tight with urgency. She nodded, her hands moving frantically over the engine. I grabbed a wrench to help, but every time we thought we had it, the motor just sputtered, then died again. Come on, Lisa grunted. Rob was at the back, still holding on to that cursed fishing line, trying to reel in the strange fish. We weren't thinking clearly. Fear was messing with us, but Rob wouldn't let go, even as the lights below got brighter. Then we saw it. A shadow appeared on the bow of the boat. At first we thought it was someone. Maybe another boat had finally come to rescue us. But no. This figure, it wasn't human. It stood motionless, just watching us. We froze, unsure if we should run, scream, or do something else. Tommy was the first to break the silence. Who is that?" His voice cracked as he backed away, almost tripping over his own feet. None of us moved. The shadow didn't either. Suddenly, a memory hit me. The anchor. That rusty old thing Lisa had seen earlier. It had to be connected to something bigger. I remembered a story my grandpa used to tell. About a shipwreck out here. A vessel that had gone down carrying cursed treasure. People said the curse had sunk the ship, dragging it to the bottom of the sea. Could that be what we were dealing with? "Guys," I said, my voice shaky, "I think this has something to do with that shipwreck. The one with the cursed treasure. That anchor. Maybe it's from the wreck. And whatever's down there doesn't want us messing with it." Rob's face went pale. "Cursed treasure? Are you serious?" "Do you have a better explanation?" I shot back. We didn't have time to argue. Whatever was pulling us down wasn't stopping. "We need to work together right now," Lisa shouted, grabbing a tool from the floor. We needed to cut that rope before it dragged us under. I grabbed a knife, Rob held the line, and even Tommy, shaken as he was, pitched in. The rope was thick, slimy, and strong, but together we hacked at it. Every second felt like a lifetime. Just as we managed to cut through, the water exploded. A massive tentacle, slick and black, shot out of the water. It wrapped around the side of the boat, pulling us back. We screamed, trying to pry it off, but it was too strong. The boat groaned under the pressure. This thing, it wasn't done with us. Lisa slashed at the tentacle with her knife, but it barely made a mark. "We're not going to make it!" Tommy screamed, his eyes wild with terror. And then, just when I thought we were about to be pulled under for good, something even stranger happened. A loud hum filled the air, followed by the sound of engines. Lights flashed across the water, and a boat appeared. Mia's boat. Her rescue team had arrived with underwater drones and sonar equipment. They scanned the area, revealing the source of the chouse. It wasn't a Kersey after all. It was a rari, giant squid, protecting its territory. The thing had grabbed it onto our boat thinking we were a threat. Mia's team managed to lure it away using the drones, giving us enough time to get back on shore. Back on land, old Pete was waiting for us. He didn't look surprised. "Knew you'd run into that squid," he said calmly. "That anchor you found, it's not cursed. Just an old relic from the sea. But that squid, it's been guarding this place for years. Locals call it a protector. Ain't no curse, just nature doing its thing." We stood there, dumbfounded. All that terror, and it turned out to be a squid. Rob shook his head, laughing weakly. "I'm never going fishing again." "Yeah," I said, still catching my breath. "Next time, we listen to old Pete."